Va bene, ragazzi, dai, è arrivato il momento. È un po' che volevo vedere questo documentario, cercavo la giornata giusta e il momento giusto e direi che è questo. La storia di Fallout, il documentario fatto dal canale GVMERS che adesso vi mostro, e specie quando facciamo questi tipi di reaction così belli potenti, io vi mostro sempre il canale e vi raccomando, ragazzi, di andare a darci un'occhiata. Il canale è questo qui, iscrivetevi, mi raccomando, e magari supportateli in quello che fanno perché fanno veramente delle gran belle cose. D'accordo? Quindi mi raccomando, adesso vediamo il loro documentario e però vanno supportati, ok? Bene, detto questo, ragazzi, stop all'audio, The History of Fallout. Non ci sono i sottotitoli in italiano, ci sono soltanto quelli automatici in inglese tradotti in italiano, quindi considerate che i sottotitoli saranno pieni di cagate. È ovvio che sia così. Purtroppo è il massimo che si può fare. Quindi, eccoci qua, partiamo. Storia di Fallout è vera, so che deve ancora arrivare. Alcune cose non sono scientificamente possibili. La storia del gioco proprio.
From deep tabletop games and pen and paper experiences, which inspired a generation of developers to implement similar themes and mechanics into interactive adventures. Fallout spawned from such an era, initially conceived as the first computer game adaptation of GURPS. For a brief period, it even played the part of a potential Wasteland sequel. Publisher Interplay Productions' inability to secure the licensing rights from Electronic Arts ensured the hopeful follow-up never came to fruition. However, the core tenets would not stray far. Thus, what eventually became Fallout bore all the hallmarks of a Wasteland successor in everything but name. Fallout broke away from its roots after the
Wasteland è arrivato prima. Neanche ci avevo fatto caso.
Softworks shelving the isometric turn-based gameplay in favor of 3D graphics and real-time action RPG fare. In 2008, then,
Basso il volume del video? Mo dovrebbe essere meglio. Piace il gent? Abbastanza.
The seminal title served as the catalyst to multiple spin-offs and another mainline sequel courtesy of its success. But the franchise's countless victories weren't earned without hardship. Design challenges and legal woes nearly resulted in the first Fallout being canceled on more than one occasion. Every other installment faced its share of setbacks as well. Still, the series has yet to encounter an obstacle too impossible to overcome, though Bethesda Game Studios' perceived stagnation in game design has raised questions about its continued dominance in the role-playing space. But if past precedent proves any kind of guide, Fallout's Wasteland hides within it much potential, just waiting to be mined. This is the history of Fallout.
Io non posso fare a meno di pensare una cosa, ragazzi. Vi immaginate l'Arian Studio che rifà un Fallout RPG come si deve? Oh, ecco, manco a farla apposta. Esatto. Alessandro, grazie mille del follow. No, ragazzi, cosa avete appena detto? Mi sono illuminati gli occhi. Lo so.
This documentary wouldn't be possible without you. Your support lets us, a small independent team, continue creating content we're proud of. Want to see more long-form history videos such as this one, as well as a front row seat to what's coming next? By joining us on Patreon, you'll be the first to access our newest videos. In addition to
Se volete supportarli, ragazzi, c'è il loro Patreon. Realizzano queste cose e sono molto fighe.
The history of Fallout.
Hi, welcome to the Interplay Productions tour of facilities. My name is Bill Dugan, and I'll be taking you on a tour of Interplay, where we make games so you won't have to. I'm sure you've heard of Interplay. We've made games like Battle Chess, Lord of the Rings, and recently Star Trek Enhanced CD-ROM.
It started in 1994 as a side project, specifically a game engine crafted by a lone Interplay developer, Tim Kaine, who wanted to build proprietary technology despite the company having access to BioWare's Infinity Engine. As a one-man crew, Kane designed the technology in his spare time while devoting regular work hours to assisting on other internal projects like Stonekeep. Over time, the engine morphed into an actual game, complete with turn-based combat modeled after the then newly released XCOM UFO Defense. The XCOM influence helped shape the project's original gameplay prototype, which Kane developed using assets from existing Interplay titles. Unbeknownst to the programmer, the prototype represented the slimmest fraction of his vision's overall potential. He revealed in a Fallout post-mortem during GDC 2012 that the first year of development flew by without a plan in place. For one, because it had been in production for less than a year. Interplay executives
Un'altra cosa che vorrei vedere insieme a voi sono un po' di video della
treated
GDC,
it accordingly.
che sono fighi
Few
da
resources were
vedere.
allocated to Kane, leaving him to spend 6 months working alone before one scripter and an artist joined the effort for the next 6 months. Several concepts came and went during the ideation phase. The small group considered exploring a fantasy setting, but discarded the notion after Interplay's purchase of the Forgotten Realms and Planescape D&D licenses in late 1994. According to Kane, there were concerns about his fantasy project potentially competing with prospective Dungeons & Dragons adventures. In other words, the so-called B product would have landed on the chopping block if the marketing department had gotten its way. It was only after speaking with Kane and seeing the prototype in action that company founder Brian Fargo championed the game's development. Interestingly, time travel had also briefly entered the discussion.
Che belle storie queste. Brian Fargo è un altro di quelli quelli storici proprio.
A far-flung future ruled by dinosaurs. Interplay producers doubted such an experience would ever receive the green light from higher-ups. An alien invasion story marked the first steps towards success. The idea centering on extraterrestrial forces assuming control over every city on Earth, barring one, which would become the player's base of operations. This XCOM-like theme later informed the introduction of vaults as home bases and laid the foundations for the nuclear fallout motif. Instead of moving forward with the creation of a fresh IP, however, the developers proposed a Wasteland sequel, inspired by their shared love of the 1988 classic. For about 12 months, the team of around a dozen people mapped out how best to continue the role-playing series originally produced by Interplay. But publisher Electronic Arts' refusal to license out the property placed Kane's steadily growing crew back at the starting line.
Qui siamo,
Regardless of this
mi pare, agli
misfortune,
inizi degli anni 90, mi pare.
remained integral to the core of what they were targeting. Kane reasoned the seminal RPG boasted everything his group wanted to put in its game, particularly the more nuanced approach to morality. Dissimilar from the likes of Ultima, Wasteland never restricted players based on good or bad moral choices, thus making their own in-game skill the only true limitation. With that constituting the nexus of the experience, the project persisted as somewhat of a Wasteland successor, though myriad other influences from literature and popular culture informed the creative process as well. Richard Matheson's I Am Legend novel inspired the normal person in a wasteland conceit that became a Fallout staple. And the premise of communities cherishing technology during post-war times in Walter M. Miller Jr.'s A Canticle for Leibowitz partly influenced the Brotherhood of Steel's creation. The design aesthetic pulled from an array of sources, too. As an example, 80s sci-fi horror show The Day After helped inform Kane and Company's interpretation of how civilization would fall apart after nuclear fallout. Arts director Leonard Borsky looked to the 1956 film Forbidden Planet when deciding to base all of the RPG's technology on how fiction in the 1950s envisioned futuristic tech. Meanwhile, the steampunk aesthetic developed through the art team's appreciation for 1995's The City of Lost Children. Of all of Fallout's countless influences, the GURPS tabletop system arguably had the most pivotal impact. Interplay acquired the GURPS license from Steve Jackson Games in the second full year of development, a joint venture that solidified the new title's turn-based combat system. The vision statement from the period in which the game bore the title of Fallout, a GURPS post-nuclear adventure, noted the role-playing system would provide detailed tactical combat, complex and reactive NPCs, balanced encounters, and useful non-combat skills. By this point, Kane's crew had already settled on other key parts of the action. The third-person perspective was seen as ideal for strategy gameplay, and the cavalier oblique angle, often misrepresented as isometric, proved essential for calculation purposes.
Per alcune cose non sono abbastanza boomer,
good and evil
è vero.
morality paths was what the vision statement labeled mega levels of violence, something Steve Jackson Games could not abide. Concerns about the liberal use of violence reared their heads early in Fallout's third year of development. Kane recalled the GURPS owners not appreciating the art style or cartoonish skill cards either. Reports about the behind-the-scenes drama circulated in the press in February 1997, with the first claiming Interplay and Steve Jackson Games had parted ways over creative differences. Not too long thereafter, comments from Jackson himself insisted negotiations had resumed. These talks didn't last long. Interplay officially dropped the GURPS license in March 1997, intent on creating an in-house alternative for the generic universal role-playing system. Prior to Interplay cutting ties with
Generic
GURPS,
Universal
Kane
Role
said
Playing
the talks
System.
spreading from closed-door meetings hinted at Fallout potentially facing cancellation if the Steve Jackson deal fell through, meaning its creators would be assigned to other Interplay works in progress. Instead, after the studio let go of the license, the designer convinced higher-ups to let him rework GURPS into a proprietary combat system. Interplay set a 2-week deadline, giving lead designer Chris Taylor 1 week to design the overhauled system, while Tim Kaine set aside 7 days to code it. Luckily, Taylor had a rudimentary rule set he conceptualized years prior called Medieval that he drew from. The result of the 14-day effort was Fallout's
GVRPS
now iconic
RPS è un sistema di
special rule
gioco.
set.
Ah, sì, sì, sì,
Its
no, quello
acronym
avevo
standing
capito.
for Strength, Perception, Endurance, Charisma, Intelligence, Agility, and Luck. Overcoming such an obstacle hardly counted as the last of the Fallout team's problems, though. Blizzard Entertainment reshaped role-playing games upon deploying Diablo on PC in January 1997. As a real-time experience, the dungeon crawler's procedurally generated dungeons were accentuated by exciting enemy encounters and a compelling loot system, all combined to create what critics described as an addictive gameplay loop that ended far too soon. The Blizzard North squad behind Diablo initially hoped to sell 100,000 units, too modest an estimate for a game whose demand generated 450,000 pre-orders several months ahead of release. Unsurprisingly, Diablo's critical
Il
and
primo
commercial
Diablo.
success raised
Non l'ho mai
eyebrows in
giocato
Irvine,
quello.
California,
Ho
when
giocato solo il
Interplay
2.
marketing leads began insisting Fallout follow the path of the dungeon crawler. Switching gears to something more in line with Diablo would have required a drastic overhaul, given Fallout was
Sì, come
approximately 3
hanno
years into
visto
its development. Tim
Diablo,
Kaine
il successo
remembered
che ha
how
avuto,
marketing still
e il
pushed the
sistema.
issue, mandating feasibility studies to determine whether rewriting the code for real-time gameplay would prove worthwhile. The marketing department ultimately relented after lots of back and forth, but not before the Diablo-based testing slowed production to a crawl. And by this point, time had become precious. The time-consuming creation of the talking heads represented one noteworthy feature that differentiated Fallout from Diablo and countless other RPGs on store shelves. These non-playable characters came in the form of handcrafted, highly detailed 3D models with whom players could converse, as opposed to reading their speech through text. Each head required 8 weeks of work, with another 3 months of production time tacked on for voice matching the spoken dialogue delivered by actors such as Richard Dean Anderson of Stargate SG-1 fame. Though the team aimed to include upwards of 50 talking heads, the time sink only allowed for about a dozen. Fallout's followers were limited by similar constraints. Since companions didn't appear in the game's original spec, developers pursued the idea through scripting characters like Dogmeat and Ian, having no time to actually code them. The companions tested so well with quality assurance that Katya and Tycho made the cut too. Unfortunately, the followers quickly became a source of numerous bugs, none of which could be fixed because the characters hadn't been implemented in the code. The perk system additionally spawned from a fast turnover of ideas, although its hasty creation wasn't the result of a looming deadline. On the contrary, perks were a case of simple implementation, born out of studio founder Brian Fargo's desire for something deeper than skill raises. When lead designer Chris Taylor received the feedback, he devised perks as a way for players to expand upon and differentiate their characters. The entire framework made its way into Fallout in just 2 days, proving so effective that Fargo and the QA team felt instantly more engaged during subsequent playtests. Despite such quick and easy wins, various complications precipitated crunch practices in the final half-year stretch of development, whereby the crew transitioned from 6-day work weeks to 12 to 14-hour days every day. Tim Kaine argued the intense schedule came as a necessary symptom of having a small team, since the head count totaled 30 people or so. As they toiled away on wrapping up production, the child
Tim Kaine ha un suo canale, abbiamo visto qualche suo video e ne vedremo degli altri. Ciao Marcotto.
The Fallout developers' insistence that choices perceived as both good and evil carried heavy consequences extended
Sì, no, ai tempi l'uscita di Diablo ha scatenato il casino.
This and the
Sì, sì.
levels of violence earned the post-nuclear adventure an M rating from the ESRB. In Europe, on the other hand, the RPG was denied release until Interplay removed all children from the disc. In spite of myriad complications, the game, originally named Vault 13, launched to widespread acclaim on PC in October 1997. Reviewers immediately counted the unofficial Wasteland sequel among the best role-playing games they'd played in years, applauding its style and gameplay chops, while especially praising Interplay's inventiveness with the story, characters, and skill system. Being a critical darling and shoe-in for Game of the Year and RPG of the Year awards, impacted Fallout's commercial success only so much. It sold 600,000 units, minor league figures compared to the 1 million Baldur's Gate would be on track to achieve when it landed the following year. Internally, though, Interplay considered Fallout's appreciable sales evidence of a risk that paid off.
I don't have to prove anything to you.
Sì, vabbè, infatti, non è stato male. Reggio, buonasera.
Fallout generated a surprising amount of in-house buzz ahead of its debut. Staff members crunched to meet deadlines, but QA developers reportedly stayed late and worked on weekends without pay for an opportunity to play more of the RPG. Recognizing that Fallout's creation had become a labor of love for those involved, Interplay executives commissioned a sequel.
Immagino che succeda ancora adesso comunque.
Release. Tim Kaine disclosed in a 2010 discussion with YouTuber Matt Barton that a sequel wasn't in his and the team's plans. He elaborated further in a video of his own years later, insisting talks of a potential Fallout 2 only surfaced twice during development. Once when debating the short-sightedness of the proposed Vault 13 title. The topic broke through again when formatting for the game manual came back with a blank last page. Displeased with the empty space, art director Leonard Borsky filled it with an in-universe advertisement for the Garden of Eden Creation Kit, or GEC, that later informed the theme behind the actual sequel. Still, Interplay's sudden interest in preemptively investing in a B-tier project's future constituted background noise for Kaine. While he focused on shipping the first post-nuclear adventure, producer Fergus Urquhart spun up a new division within Interplay named Black Isle Studios. This vertical led development on the second entry, with Fallout's assistant producer Fred Hatch at the helm, accompanied by designer and relative newcomer Matt Norton and former Fallout designer David Hendy. As Hatch and company worked on a pitch for the second outing, the Fallout 1 developers were struggling to get their game out the door. Interplay intended on distributing the RPG in the spring of 1997. Missed deadlines eventually delayed it to mid-September. But as that hard deadline closed in, the crew discovered the worst kind of crash bug. Some people could explore the wasteland for hours without encountering game-breaking bugs, yet playing for only a couple of minutes resulted in crashing errors for others. All crash reports led to random places in the code, courtesy of a bizarre overwrite bug randomly writing junk into the game's memory. With all hands on deck elsewhere, Kaine assigned contractor Mark Harrison the task of investigating the glitch and finding a solution. The lead joined Harrison after hours to help identify the problem, a tedious process somewhat simplified by the latter's creation of a bear trap that allowed them to slowly narrow down the crash-inducing error. This weeks-long endeavor caused much frustration because of Interplay co-founder Brian Fargo's eagerness to ship the project. Harrison and Kaine finally found the offending bug in a for loop that used a less than equals sign instead of a less than. Kaine knew the mistake was neither his nor the contractor's fault, but refused to reveal the responsible party when questioned by Fargo. Withholding such information later became the catalyst behind the pivotal decision that altered the trajectory of Fallout's future. The series creator had no intention of taking part in said future either. Save for the crashing glitch, Fallout shipped with myriad bugs intact. Thus, Kane headed up the team in charge of deploying a post-launch patch filled with the necessary fixes. Meanwhile, the Fallout 2 group had delivered its pitch to Fargo, whose lack of interest culminated in Kane being told to submit his own concept for the sequel. Having already developed an idea, Leonard Brorsky and lead artist Jason Anderson convinced him to hand in their proposal, which imagined a giant war machine destroying everything in its path across the world map. While Fargo approved, his inkling that the pitch was missing Kane's signature touch forced the producer to return to the drawing board with Brorsky and Anderson, where the trio drafted a different vision for Fallout 2. It instantly won over the studio head and secured the reluctant Kane a place as the sequel's new lead developer. To the dismay of all involved, he wouldn't hold the position for more than a few months.
The other thing that started happening was Fallout.
Questi sviluppatori fa tenerezza sono legati alle logiche tossiche di mercato di oggi. Sono giochi soprattutto perché gli piaceva. Ma per molti è ancora così, Solo che non sono negli stessi posti.
Tim Kane formally announced Fallout 2 in December 1997 on discussion platform Usenet, informing fans that despite Fallout's nearly 4-year development cycle, the follow-up would be built in 11 months. It was a tall order, considering Interplay had already segmented the Fallout dedicated team into 3 groups. One had its hands full with a patch, another tackled foreign translations, and the final bunch took over pre-production duties on the new installment. Kane, still exhausted from crunching on the previous release, oversaw all 3. Creative interference from marketing limited the lead developer's reach of power. In a video explaining why he left Interplay, Kane recalled sitting in on a marketing meeting wherein the topic of Fallout 2's cover art became a point of conversation. At his suggestion, Brorsky designed the artwork as he did for the first game. One person from sales revealed the job would be outsourced to another company, a decision made without Kane's input. Fallout's success thus seemed a double-edged sword. More attention from the publisher at large meant the tight-knit feel of the original production had abruptly been stripped away. Such meddling even extended to select gameplay choices, one of which mandated the addition of Fallout 2's Temple of Trials tutorial. The instruction from on high also demanded the tutorial remain unskippable in subsequent playthroughs, further compounding Kane's frustrations. The final straw reared its head when it became time to assign end-of-project bonuses in late 1997. Interplay's bonus structure worked such that project producers like Kane were allotted bonus funds to split amongst team members. The Fallout lead created a spreadsheet that suggested bonus pay based on 3 factors: a developer's base salary, time on the team, and the significance of their contributions. Being the longest standing crew member, Kane should have received the highest bonus, something his boss, Fergus Urquhart, readily agreed with. However, when the pay went out during the holiday season, the series creator found himself somewhere in the bottom third of extra earnings. In recalling his conversation with Brian Fargo on the matter, Kane claimed the studio executive told him that Fallout's lengthy delay, along with his protection of the person responsible for the crash bug, contributed to his bonus reduction. Fargo disputed the claim when reuniting with Kane at the Fallout TV show's April 2024 premiere, insisting he neither signed off on a reduced bonus nor remembered discussing it. Either way, the Fallout creator labeled the pay dispute as the final impetus for his departure during the sequel's production. And he wasn't the only creative lead to resign in early 1998. Leonard Brorsky and Jason Anderson used copies of Kane's resignation letter to exit at the same time. In April of that same year, the trio rejoined forces and founded Troika Games, the now defunct studio behind 2004's Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines. Interplay wouldn't press pause on its intent to turn around a sequel for its newest IP in less than a year, though. Consequently, Fallout 2 adopted a patchwork development style that simultaneously culminated in a disjointed experience and the brand's signature style.
It's a whole new thing. It's a whole new thing. Yes, yes.
Anderson, Borowski, and Kane's Fallout 2 departure notwithstanding, much of the trio's pitch provided the template for what the follow-up entry would become. Their collective imprint lingered in the game's Arroyo, the Den, and Klamath zones, as well as the GEC device players were tasked with tracking down. The problem lay in executing those plans amid a sudden and unexpected leadership vacuum. As former Black Isle developers explained in a Fallout retrospective for Retro Gamer magazine, losing these creative forces deprived the new game of its personal touch, so the IP previously defined by a labor of love surrendered to an environment wherein corporate decision-making led the charge. Black Isle staffers absent a connection to the happenings around Fallout were completely in the dark, until Fergus Urquhart called an emergency meeting where designers across the studio received assignments for areas to build for Fallout 2. According to designer Chris Avallone, a lead developer on
un
Planescape
altro
at the time,
Chris
this
Avallone,
draft
un
to
altro
hastily fill
gigante.
Fallout 2's ranks even saw otherwise occupied Black Isle members like himself dragged into the wasteland. Several people simultaneously juggled 2 projects as a result. Avallone dubbed the ordeal a patchwork beast, insomuch as random workers were tasked with tackling different parts of the experience. The game consequently lacked a spine, being built with hobbled-together content as quickly as possible for the 11-month deadline. A tonal clash thus plagued the post-nuclear RPG, courtesy of its aimless assortment of creators introducing disparate ideas.
Oh, certo che si facevano sentire le dinamiche tossiche, ma certo, perché sono umane, non uniche di certe epoche o situazioni.
Meaning the game regularly received content additions based on whatever workers in the trenches found funny. Avallone remembered fedora-wearing and Tommy gun-wielding character models being presented to him for the new Reno area, though he never requested them. This approach also disregarded Tim Kane's previous rule of leaving direct pop culture nods that players may not understand out of the equation. As such, Fallout 2 adopted wackier sensibilities, helped by Godzilla and Monty Python, and a slew of other references. The slapdash production cycle didn't exchange all of the fledgling franchise's serious qualities for over-the-top elements, evidenced by the fact that weighty ramifications remained intact. For instance, Fallout 2 users could tattoo words like slaver across their character's face only to find themselves at a loss when certain NPCs refused to conduct business with them. On top of building the sequel around outlandish design choices, the new crew sprinkled in its own flavor by expanding the 1997 title's New California setting with locales such as New Reno and Vault City. The drivable Highwayman vehicle mixed up the formula as well, letting players traverse the map at higher speeds. But not unlike Kane before them, the group sat on the receiving end of interference from marketing and sales, enough that Interplay's Brian Fargo felt the need to step in.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to announce the man who has brought very obscure Scottish surnames back into vogue. Black Isle Studios' own division director, Fergus Urquhart.
Fallout's critically acclaimed debut excited corporate decision-makers, but the pressure to secure greater commercial success mounted quickly. Black Isle Studios founder Fergus Urquhart explained in a PC Games N interview that one meeting early in the sequel's development saw marketing express special interest in the changes between games. In particular, there was a push to move away from the 256 color palette to 16-bit. Brian Fargo put his foot down, arguing in favor of maintaining the core of Fallout, most notably its emphasis on story and characters. The patchwork creative process aside, Fargo's declaration that the second game must expand on what previously worked informed the conception of an antagonist who would appear earlier in the game than the Master did in Fallout 1. Such thinking spawned a villain in super mutant Frank Horrigan, someone players would watch slaughter an innocent family without being
Bellino, grazie del
able to
follow.
interfere. Direction of this nature additionally influenced the desire to include companion characters capable of evolving throughout the experience, whereas allied NPCs in the original remained stagnant across the board. Fallout 2 players could, therefore, expect AI partners to grow and level up alongside their character, the Chosen One. Still, producer Eric DeMitt and programmer Dan Spitzley said the lack of guidelines governing the sequel
Bellino, grazie mille della sub con Prime, grazie di cuore.
let loose barely controlled chaos. The fast turnaround time meant designers often had no choice but to stitch together the shell of large environments before moving forward on something else, leaving behind barren areas of exploration that weren't completed until the 11th hour. As bizarre as the practice was, it proved essential in solidifying Fallout 2's absurdist leanings. Desolate parts of the map that remained unfinished in the lead-up to launch were supplemented with characters and missions by artists and programmers who had carte blanche to devise whatever strange ideas they could muster. This later explained content like Mickey, the treasure-hunting dwarf, and the rat scorpion that doubled as a chess master. But inventive solutions
È sempre bello sentire queste storie perché la casualità dietro certe robe è dietro certe robe è leggendaria, però c'è veramente una componente di caos bellissima. Domando e viva Gamers, sì, assolutamente. Montec, buonasera. Salifirpo, grazie mille del follow.
The sequel divided series diehards, yet impressed Tim Kaine, primarily because of Black Isle's ability to turn around a much larger experience in a fraction of the time it took to build the 1997 entry. And it couldn't be ignored that Fallout 2 paved the way for the brand's most cherished elements. Its trademark dark humor and unorthodox cast born from a motley crew of developers whose disparate ideas wound up redefining an already game-changing IP. Its market performance similarly held its own, ensuring Interplay recouped its development budget many times over. The publisher tried following the success with a third mainline installment. However, all that history remembers of Interplay's final Fallout adventures revolved around a tactics experience and a Brotherhood of Steel spin-off that, at the time, spelled doom for the groundbreaking series.
Atomic kisses, survived by a few. They had a nuclear blast.
Interplay's next Fallout installment, Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel, emerged from two primary sources of inspiration, one being Squaresoft's success with the well-received Final Fantasy Tactics in 1997. Fallout veteran Chris Taylor led the project, and
Final Fantasy Tactics dovrò veramente provarlo io, prima o poi.
That Interplay producer Chip Bumgardner's love for the tactical Final Fantasy adventure played an instrumental role in getting Fallout Tactics off the ground. The title's second point of origin stemmed from Chimera, the isometric side-scrolling shooter pitched to Interplay in May 1999. John DeMargariti, CEO of Australian indie studio Microforte, brought the side-scroller to Interplay's doorstep, intriguing the publisher's VP of Sales and Marketing, Phil Adam, though not enough to warrant a partnership. But Brian Christian, who served as the head of Interplay's 14 Degrees East subsidiary, believed Chimera had potential. Phoenix, the isometric 2D game engine which powered the demo, especially impressed the executive and compelled him to propose the idea of a tactics-focused Fallout experience to the bosses at Interplay. Microforte designer Ed Orman drafted a rough design document that guided embryonic discussions. From there, Interplay convened with the Australian development house for 5 days to outline the specifics, debating whether the game should be turn-based only and how exactly it would fit within the established Fallout mythos. One decision made from the outset ensured Tactics would maintain the franchise's pre-rendered appearance in favor of concerns that 3D technology of the day couldn't produce the level of detail developers wanted in the environments. Interplay CEO Brian Fargo put forward stipulations of his own during the early design process, specifically ordering the inclusion of an online multiplayer component. These goals, no matter how lofty, initially seemed manageable. However, the tight deadline proved far more constrictive than Microforte anticipated. The studio's publishing partners at 14 Degrees East and Interplay wanted a playable multiplayer demo ready by May 2000 for the E3 trade show, with the whole game's commercial ship date penciled in for Christmas 2000. Such a schedule meant the independent crew, with about 24 developers,
Di XCOM è stato citato fin dall'inizio, in effetti.
In a post-mortem written on game developer, producer Tony Oakton divulged that Tactics' first few months of production were spent figuring out how to translate Fallout to a completely different genre. The going was rough and further exacerbated by the departure of the lead programmer, their exit forcing Microforte to convince 14 Degrees East of the project's continued viability. The powers that be at Interplay couldn't shake their doubts either, and Fallout fans similarly proved a tough sell. In spite of the mounting skepticism coming from all sides, Tactics developers hit their E3 milestone upon finishing a multiplayer build that injected the company with much-needed morale. By Ogden's account, though, the good momentum hit a roadblock soon thereafter. After finishing the E3 2000 demo, Microforte spent the subsequent months meandering, leaving the team with nothing of consequence to show as the October 2000 deadline for a single-player build loomed ahead. The misstep culminated in a reassessment of the project, whose finer points were woefully unrefined from the outset, given the uncertainty of level designers and programmers about what was required of them as the project progressed. While nascent design parameters formed a clear enough outline,
Oh, questo era il
detail for the
2000.
through-line later
Certe cose
seemed
non cambiano mai
lacking since
comunque.
key decisions received no concrete specifications before programmers and scripters jumped on board. Tony Ogden wrote in his post-mortem that he joined the team thinking Tactics would be a turn-based RPG. It dove deeper and deeper into tactical combat and ultimately real-time gameplay over time. The problem originated from multiple sources ranging from unrealistic deadlines to the game's unmanageable scope, and the sudden realization that not all of Fallout's many moving parts would translate to a tactical experience came a little too late. Microforte's John DeMargheriti took the reins in August 2000 when conditions became untenable. Working alongside design leads on the single-player build, the executive placed an emphasis on the tactics labeled by devising ways for players to navigate interesting strategic challenges. The directive situated RPG elements on the periphery, but overcame many obstacles at once. By the end of August, then, Fallout Tactics had an enjoyable single-player level in the books. Unfortunately, the weeks spent hitting such a milestone created further
Quel
delays
magico.
because the new
Secondo me quel
tactical combat
magico
focus meant previously
è
built
quello.
levels no longer.
Facciamo un'unica interruzione, ragazzi. La magia del gaming iniziale è un po' come la musica, ragazzi, no? La magia dei Led Zeppelin, la magia dei Pink Floyd, la magia dei Queen. È frutto di un'altra epoca in cui si stavano esplorando queste cose per la prima volta. È ovvio che da certi punti di vista quella non tornerà, ma l'ispirazione, la volontà di creare storie, eccetera, c'è ancora oggi. Solo che bisogna andarlo un po' a cercare, scostare immondizia e badare un po' meno alla pubblicità, probabilmente, perché all'epoca era meno aggressiva. Ma anche il male, diciamo, dei rapporti umani c'era anche allora, adesso è più strutturato, forse c'era meno avversione al rischio, una volta, adesso ce n'è tantissima. Tante cose sono diverse, sì, ero pionieri all'epoca, però, sai com'è? Nel senso, si può essere pionieri di certe cose anche adesso, solo che ovviamente è tutto molto più strutturato.
Match the game's vision. Rewriting a
Sì,
large
la cosa
percentage of
affascinante
existing
è
missions provided
proprio il
the only
fatto
path forward.
che erano
These
pionieristici,
newly
sì.
integrated goals hardly marked the end of the studio's struggles. Throughout production, art represented one of the biggest headaches for Microforte. It entered the partnership under the assurance that Interplay would supply
Jacopo,
model
buonasera.
data for in-game graphics based on Fallout 1 and 2's characters
Interplay
and
non fosse
creatures.
stata così
The
ingorda di
publisher's
denaro,
inability to retrieve
non fosse
art from
fallita, chissà che oggi non
K-Tactics
sarebbe stata come
compounded
Bethesda
development
Larian.
difficulties that were somewhat alleviated by the Australian
Bella
studio's
domanda,
alliance
non
with the
saprei,
Academy
è
of
stato tanto
Interactive
tempo,
Arts. Microforte hired
Ormai.
half a dozen artists from the Canberra-based training facility for 3D artists, some of whom helped recreate Fallout creatures from scratch. More delays, QA-specific mishaps, and myriad balancing issues knocked Fallout Tactics into a March 2001 rollout, many months past its once-planned Fall 2000 launch window. It landed on PC to predominantly favorable review scores. Reception from the Fallout community was divisive, though opinions warmed over time. Interplay didn't explore a sequel, even though one was pitched within at least a year of the Tactics release. 14 Degrees East's Dan Levin served as a writer and designer on the 2001 project, primarily helping Microforte developers pen the narrative. Levin told fans in YouTube and Instagram comments that when he left 14 Degrees for Interplay subsidiary Shiny Entertainment, he proposed a second installment that would have established the Barnaky ending as canon. The pitch never had a chance because of Atari's acquisition of Shiny in April 2002. Still, Interplay deployed one more Fallout venture before the IP changed hands. In a June 2001 interview with RPG Planet, Black Isle boss Fergus Urquhart labeled resources and time as the obstacles preventing his team from producing Fallout 3. The studio began working on the adventure, codenamed Van Buren, early in 1999, mere months after Fallout 2 debuted. But things advanced too slowly for Interplay Entertainment, its increasingly dire financial situation necessitating that its internal groups get projects out the door at a quicker pace. Black Isle's Fallout 3 team consequently moved on to another role-playing game, Icewind Dale. The studio hoped it could revisit Fallout once Icewind Dale shipped in June 2000. However, Urquhart and producer Chris Parker were pulled away to help Baldur's Gate 3 cross the finish line for its due date that September. Because of the pair's busy schedule, the would-be Fallout 3 developers were assigned Icewind Dale's Heart of Winter expansion. Upon the content's February 2001 distribution, Black Isle again became abuzz with concepts for the next Fallout, none of which left the ideation phase. Rather, the development house's workforce was split across miscellaneous projects and the eventually canceled CRPG known as Torn. Interplay's final turn as the steward of Fallout.
Di questo non mi ricordo proprio niente
PlayStation
invece.
2 and Xbox in the first quarter of 2004 amid the company's rocky expansion into console gaming. Subtitled Brotherhood of Steel, the endeavor presented players with a console-ified version of Fallout, complete with RPG elements like conversational NPCs and character skills, yet packaged in an experience that prioritized action-oriented gameplay. Interplay developers built Brotherhood of Steel on the Snowblind technology behind Baldur's Gate's Dark Alliance console game, then rewrote many of its systems to befit an emphasis on ranged combat. It received mixed results based on critic and user reviews. Some considered Brotherhood of Steel an interesting enough spin-off. Meanwhile, others viewed it as no more than a half-hearted attempt at chasing new audiences. For Fallout diehards, such a release couldn't have come at a worse time, considering Interplay's closure of Black Isle Studios in December 2003. Plans for a PS2 exclusive follow-up sat on the docket, falling apart because of the first game's lackluster sales and penalties imposed on Interplay by California labor officials. Leaked design documents later revealed that production on the sequel, nicknamed Vagrant Lands, commenced prior to Brotherhood of Steel's release, which itself was reportedly used as a platform to pay for the development costs of the engine and fund the second game. Fortunately, Fallout's next major outing would, in part, return the IP to its former glory.
We wanted open world, we wanted, kind of role-playing elements and things like this. And we made a list of things that we might want to do. At the top of the list was Fallout.
Da Vespe, ciao.
By the time Fallout Tactics launched in March 2001, Interplay Entertainment had fallen deep into financial trouble, exacerbated by its persistently declining revenue and debt owed to credit lenders. Paris, France-based game publisher Titus Interactive invested in the corporation in exchange for the right to install its co-founder, Hervé Kahn, as Interplay president. The French company held a 34% stake in Interplay in June 2001, then exchanged enough convertible bonds in August to secure 27.09 million shares of Interplay stock, thus acquiring a 51.52% majority stake. Such a takeover culminated in Titus assuming control of Interplay's board of directors. The latter's trajectory changed dramatically from that point forward, most notably evident by the sudden shift in focus from PC to console gaming. Eventually, differences of opinion regarding future plans contributed to Interplay founder Brian Fargo's departure in January 2002. Hervé Kahn was appointed CEO in his stead. Interplay shrunk in size throughout subsequent years and continuously faced revenue losses, though Kahn insisted healthier operations kept the company above water in a 2003 earnings report. Hope especially peeked over the horizon in July 2004 when Interplay licensed Fallout's worldwide publishing rights to Bethesda Softworks, which would develop and publish Fallout 3 as a sequel to the original series. A statement from Kahn called the deal a good agreement for both companies and gamers, but ultimately, the partnership had no bearing on Interplay's short-term health. Despite shuttering Black Isle Studios, selling assets and licensing properties, Interplay's August 2005 quarterly report to the Securities and Exchange Commission showed a company trapped in considerable debt. That no new internal projects were planned at the time only made matters more dire. However, a late 2006 SEC filing revealed Interplay still harbored hopes of building bold Fallout adventures, even with Elder Scrolls developer Bethesda Game Studios hard at work on Fallout 3. The SEC document outlined high-level aspirations for a Fallout MMO with a $75 million budget that would begin development in January 2007 and release by July
No,
2010.
pensa te.
Interplay's research showed the MMO market had enjoyed
Fallout
a staggering
MMO,
boom,
vabbè,
growing from 5 million
era venuto
paid
fuori,
subscribers
ecco appunto.
to 13 million in just 1
Esatto.
year as of June 2006. As
L'influenza
such,
di
the
World of
company
Warcraft.
intended to develop a subscription-based experience that it projected would reach 1 million subscribers by the end of year 1, regardless of competition from the likes of NCSoft's Guild Wars and Blizzard Entertainment's World of Warcraft. Pulling off such a feat required further dealings with Bethesda Softworks. In 2007, then, Bethesda purchased the Fallout IP outright for $5.75 million. As part of the deal, Fallout's new owner licensed the property to Interplay for the creation of an MMO later codenamed Project V13, short for Vault 13. The agreement included rigid terms, with one clause dictating Interplay commence production within 2 years of the deal entering into effect. If the previous IP owner found itself unable to secure at least $30 million of funding for the $75 million budget within those 24 months, it would relinquish the MMO rights. The contract additionally stipulated that Interplay commercially launch the online game within 4 years of development start date, lest it permanently forfeit its license rights. Interplay didn't waste time getting its ducks in a row. The Bethesda deal was signed in April 2007, and after reporting a year-over-year sales decrease of 86% that November, Interplay reopened its in-house development studio and hired designer and Fallout co-creator Jason Anderson to lead Project V13. From the public's perspective, the next 2 years passed without issue, leaving many to believe Interplay staffers were busy fulfilling the promise of an online-focused Fallout. Bethesda believed otherwise. And it didn't help that Jason Anderson departed Interplay yet again in early 2009, joining the Brian Fargo-founded In Exile Entertainment to produce Wasteland 2, the franchise that inspired Fallout's creation.
In Exile sta facendo cose belle, ragazzi.
Exit, Interplay revealed Earthrise developer
È sotto Microsoft adesso, già da un po'.
Apocalyptic MMO through to completion. SEC documents surfaced later in the month detailing the legal threat Bethesda issued to Interplay for breaching their contract by not beginning production on the MMO within the agreed-upon 2-year timeframe. While no obstacle would prevent Interplay from pushing forward with Project V13, the dispute with Bethesda considerably slowed progress when the Fallout 3 publisher filed a trademark infringement lawsuit in September 2009. Bethesda accused Interplay of not requesting approval for the distribution of Fallout Trilogy, a bundle comprising Fallout, its sequel, and Fallout Tactics. Based on the complaint, the offending party especially took umbrage with Fallout Trilogy's confusingly similar title to Fallout 3. The licensing of pre-Fallout 3 installments to digital storefronts like GOG and Steam also garnered mention in the filing because Interplay allegedly neglected to seek permission. In addition, Bethesda made good on an earlier threat to pursue the termination of Interplay's MMO rights, arguing the California-based outfit had not yet started full-scale production on Project V13 in the mandated 24-month period. Interplay disputed the claims in court by reportedly producing a litany of files filled with conceptual designs, along with a tech demo set in a desert landscape. In October 2009, this proof convinced a judge to deny Bethesda's attempted injunction on the steadily progressing MMO endeavor. Thus, Interplay persisted, even uploading a 30-second teaser trailer in June 2010 for the massively multiplayer game, complete with an official title reveal, Fallout Online. Details from scant public information suggested there was more to show as well, given developers had supposedly mapped out terrain stretching beyond 65,000 miles, buttressed by characters, creatures, and missions all in varying stages of completion. According to reporting by The Verge, Masthead Studios played an integral role in creating Fallout Online's content, joining forces with series veterans such as lead designer Chris Taylor and dialogue scribe Marco Green.
Panic, buonasera.
The Masthead crew helped craft a post-apocalyptic adventure set across the American West Coast in a timeline triggered by several disasters, kick-starting a new story arc. O'Green claimed the MMO would have revisited classic moments and characters, one being the first game's final boss, the Master. Moreover, the developers imagined game worldwide meta puzzles, or super quests, designed as server-wide missions that encouraged players to assemble super teams and take on challenges. Much effort went into the bones of the multiplayer game, but O'Green told The Verge that what Interplay and Masthead built wasn't very expansive in terms of completed work. Masthead stepping away in 2011 when Bethesda threatened the studio with litigation further stalled any real chance at progress. Interplay similarly gave up in January 2012, surrendering the MMO rights to Bethesda for a $2 million payout. The settlement guaranteed the cancellation of Fallout Online and resulted in Interplay relinquishing the rights to the first two games, Fallout Tactics and merchandising. What had once seemed a compelling and potentially lucrative direction suddenly fell into the abyss, and those who stood to gain the most from such potential walked away with only $2 million. Many onlookers wondered where exactly things had gone wrong, but as people in the know have insisted, very little went right after Bethesda gained control of the IP in 2007. Hervé Khan's brother and Interplay president Eric Khan spoke candidly in an Edge magazine interview during the height of his company's legal battle with Bethesda. Eric claimed that when Hervé served as president, he'd offered Bethesda the rights to Fallout and the MMO for $50 million, a price the publisher supposedly deemed too costly. The negotiations ended in 2007 with the Elder Scrolls company paying less than $6 million for everything except the MMO license. Series veteran Jason Anderson entered the mix not too long thereafter, originally envisioning an experience that paid homage to director Terry Gilliam's Orwellian sci-fi film Brazil and the neo-noir comic series Hard Boiled from Jeff Darrow and Frank Miller. Freelance artist Caleb Cleveland recalled Project V13 in its earliest stages, shedding Fallout's Big Orange Wasteland aesthetic in favor of urban futurism. These abstractions never went anywhere. In a Games TM interview, Anderson himself said it was impossible to secure Bethesda's approval on anything Project V13 related. Considering the 2007 contract's rigid conditions, the Fallout veteran felt Bethesda had no intention of ever allowing Interplay to actually create an MMO. Hence his departure not 2 years into development. Interplay kept hope alive by outsourcing Masthead, yet Mark O'Green lamented how such hope drifted away when Bethesda filed its September 2009 lawsuit, giving many involved the sense there were zero chances of Project V13 ever becoming available. It wasn't a battle the much smaller, cash-strapped company could keep up forever either. When all was said and done, the persistence of Bethesda, combined with Masthead's exit and Interplay's confusing attempts at proving its development history, left the latter with nowhere else to turn. The 2012 announcement of Fallout Online's cancellation and rights transfer took onlookers by surprise. Interplay tried repurposing Project V13 sans the Fallout trappings through a crowd-funded single-player RPG, yet lacking community support swiftly forced the idea down the drain. All in all, Bethesda stood to gain little, if anything, from Fallout Online, no matter its prospective success. Interplay would have released a game that stepped on Fallout 3's toes just years after its 2008 debut.
Come sta andando Fallout 76 adesso? Io non ne ho idea. Meglio di prima sicuro.
With 2010's New Vegas spin-off further complicating the narrative. And as fans would eventually learn, Bethesda had far-reaching aspirations for the radiation-ravaged wasteland. Rockville, Maryland-based Bethesda Softworks shifted gears in 2001, spinning off its internal development team into Bethesda Game Studios while maintaining the Softworks label for its publishing efforts under ZeniMax Media. The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind arrived in 2002 as the first outing from the BGS vertical and re-established the group as a tour de force in the RPG space. While The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion entered production not long after Morrowind's ship date, the fantasy RPG developers eagerly awaited the chance to apply their talents to a second project. A list of ideas spawned from such talks. the very top of it occupied by Interplay Entertainment's Fallout. Fortunately for developers, Bethesda executives familiar with the bosses at Interplay turned wishful thinking into reality quite rapidly. The deal let a team helmed by Oblivion's executive producer Todd Howard start pre-production on the next Fallout, around the time Bethesda and Interplay inked their
Eccolo.
2004 licensing agreement. Upon shipping Oblivion in 2006, Bethesda ensured the post-apocalyptic RPG received the brunt of its support, assigning some staffers to the Shivering Isles expansion for Elder Scrolls IV and placing the rest on what would become Fallout 3. In light of the Interplay property's rich heritage, all involved had their work cut out for them. Creative leads decided early in the process that the studio would develop Fallout's new installment as if it had produced the original two adventures. In a making-of documentary, product manager Pete Hines said Bethesda dreamt of elevating the genre and gaming by paying homage to the classic series while simultaneously paving its own path. This thinking saw the franchise shift to 3D, adopt the first-person perspective, and move from the American West Coast to the East in a story set approximately 3 decades after the events of Fallout 2. Not encroaching on Interplay's territory was the motivating factor behind some of the narrative-centric decisions. Lead designer and writer Emil Pagliarulo explained skipping forward 30-plus years let the Fallout 3 creators explore an increasingly deteriorating society wherein rampant radiation and scarce resources left humanity struggling. The Washington, D.C. setting in which these ideas manifested wasn't always on the cards, though. On the contrary, Todd Howard pushed for another West Coast adventure, initially arguing the U.S. Capitol lacked the right Fallout feel. But Pagliarulo's pitch to design a game set in their own backyard struck a chord, especially since the Maryland-based development house had the perfect position from which to fully realize D.C. and its surrounding suburbs. Instead of building a rough facsimile of the Federal District, the developers used Fallout's retro-futuristic 1950s aesthetic to its advantage. Classical-looking structures like government buildings kept their general form factor, yet were embellished with an Art Deco flair and metal plating that befit the post-apocalyptic game world. Every detail informed the two-pronged design philosophy as identified by lead artist Istvan Pele. For one, honoring the classic games remained of the utmost importance, though updating the art style to appease modern technology standards meant incorporating more realism. Secondly, the artists approached Fallout 3's aesthetic look from a stance prioritizing the dystopian elements, yet maintaining a semblance of beauty and wonder. A kindred line of thinking determined the overall tone. Speaking with PC Gamer in 2019, lead producer Gavin Carter remembered Fallout 1 constituting the primary point of reference in this respect. Bethesda appreciated Fallout 2 for realigning the series tonally, but believed the humor and pop culture-laden themes pulled players out of the experience. Hence, Fallout 3's resurrection of the serious qualities pervading the original game.
Ho giocato Split Fiction? Assolutamente. Per ora, per adesso è il mio GOTY. Incredibile.
Also borrowed from outside sources such as Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Planning the adventure and all of its moving parts was one thing. Delivering on those ambitions conjured up other challenges. The Gamebryo engine that had powered Morrowind and Oblivion also brought Fallout 3 to life. The improvements made over the course of 8 years playing an integral part in the RPG's scope and detail. Todd Howard divulged on multiple occasions the original attempt at rendering way more of the Washington, D.C. map than necessary, eventually culminating in developers scaling back the game's size by about half. Locales like the district's downtown area received the brunt of the cuts. In turn, liberties were taken in the interest of gameplay, as seen in design decisions that shortened travel distances and shuffled around historical landmarks. But the trick lay in crafting gameplay elements that facilitated the depth of an RPG alongside the thrill of a shooter. After all, Bethesda Game Studios had no intention of making a straightforward FPS, so bridging the gap between the two genres felt paramount to nailing Fallout 3's moment-to-moment action. Howard and company thus devised Vault Tech Assisted Targeting Systems, or VATS, coming at role-playing and gun mechanics from an angle emulating the theoretical combination of Burnout's crash mode with body parts. VATS pause the action, allowing users a brief period of respite wherein they could take measured, precise shots at specific body parts. Successful leg shots slowed the enemy's movement. Hitting arms adversely affected their shooting accuracy, and headshots dealt devastating critical hit damage. Interestingly, pausing had no part in the initial design. only surfacing after developers realized that halting the chaos opened up the opportunity to tactically assess combat situations. While the importance of solid FPS gameplay couldn't be understated, Bethesda additionally had to measure up against Fallout 1's acclaimed commitment to meaningful choices and consequences. The pursuit of such a tall order encouraged the assignment of Emil Pagliarulo
Esatto,
as
Ken,
Bethesda's
assolutamente.
first ever lead writer. Pagliarulo's earliest contribution was penning the introductory sequence voiced by actor Ron Perlman, which the developer used as a guide when drafting the overarching narrative. Together, Pagliarulo and Howard conceived a tale focalizing a father and his child, the latter being raised from birth as a vault dweller who would eventually venture into the wasteland. From there, Pagliarulo scripted the main questline and provided a general framework for side quests. He thought of his role as more editorial in nature, leaving game designers to fill in the finer details. These combined efforts engendered an experience whose quest structure bore more in common with 1997's Fallout than Oblivion. There existed an immediacy to the choice and consequences storytelling, for instance, with long-term effects also balancing out the narrative threads in ways that would surprise players. Tree-based dialogue options deepen the role-playing, courtesy of Bethesda eschewing the more topic-based dialogue exchanges from its older projects. Ultimately, it all buoyed a Fallout 3 ending saturated with numerous permutations, each based on player behavior and choice. A contingent of series faithful cared not for Bethesda's intentions, though. Character artist Jonah Loeb divulged in a 2024 YouTube video that developers received death threats following the game's reveal, prompting the hiring of a security guard for the first time in company history. Loeb explained that, to this small but very vocal community, our attempt to resurrect the franchise was nothing less than a sacrilege. While some would derisively dub the entry Oblivion with guns, the RPG's October 2008 launch on PC and consoles garnered widespread acclaim and won numerous Game of the Year awards. Post-launch DLC support in the form of add-ons
Che anni erano? Ecco appunto. Comportamento di certi è sempre quello.
Fallout revival for quite some time. But while Bethesda's turn as the franchise steward had a long road ahead, the next trek across the desolate world involved a pit stop in familiar territory. With Fallout 3 on store shelves and DLC development well underway, Bethesda Game Studios would soon need all hands on deck to
Andaterio troppo alto? Beh, pure quello degli utenti comunque sta là. Cioè, è troppo lontano. Piaciuto anche a loro. Alla fin fine.
So in realizing they couldn't do everything on their own, Bethesda passed the baton to Obsidian Entertainment, the Irvine, California-based group established in 2003 by Black Isle and Interplay alumni Fergus Urquhart, Chris Avallone, Chris Parker, Gary Monahan, and Chris Jones. Obsidian jumped at the chance to revisit the IP many of its number had helped spearhead, though the project's limitations quickly shone through. The Fallout 3 spin-off had to release within an 18-month timeframe and run on Bethesda's bespoke GVMERS engine. A rough and tough development cycle lay in wait for Obsidian, but all involved accepted the task of expanding upon Fallout 3's combat and world-building in stride. Plus, the spin-off veered beyond being an extension of the Bethesda-created revival. It additionally marked the only chance Urquhart and his team would have at resurrecting Van Buren, their previously cancelled Fallout 3 attempt. Had things gone Black Isle's way
Vegas molto meglio del 3. Non lo so ragazzi, non ne ho giocato neanche uno dei due. Fallout ho provati più recenti.
Urquhart told US Gamer
il 4 e 76.
Chose the West Coast as the setting for its Fallout project, as the wide-spanning locale let them bridge the gap between old-school titles.
Sogno quando eri più giovane? Parecchi. Ma finora il 30% realizzato.
Body introduced in Fallout 2 had last been seen trying to widen its foothold in the wasteland. On top of NCR's reappearance as a driving force, a handful of
Half-Life, ci sono rumor, diciamo.
Firstly, a faction-heavy story would drive the narrative. Secondly, New Vegas would serve as the central backdrop.
Ed eccolo qui.
Kicked around other concepts for a while too, with one pitch imagining Fallout 2's city of New Reno as the main backdrop. Another proposal considered placing a ghoul in the role of a playable hero. Technical challenges concerning the armor system saw the ghoul roleplay shelved in an instant. With New Vegas constituted as the chosen setting, the project, initially subtitled Sin City, needed parameters on how best to render the entertainment capital of the world. Project director J.E. Sawyer felt the 1950s and 1960s seemed the perfect time period and complemented the game's thematic emphasis on gangs of the era. Real-life figures like mobster Bugsy Siegel, who'd been instrumental to the Vegas Strip's development, embodied Obsidian's vision, evidenced by the creation of in-universe
E New
gangs,
Vegas
the
è molto
Alertus,
amato,
the
però,
Chairman, and the
come
White
gioco.
Glove
Questo lo so per
Society.
certo.
Existing under the governance of the Howard Hughes patterned Mr. House, New Vegas's gang-affiliated characters neatly melded with the faction-centric storytelling. House, as a business magnate, dreamt of restoring the city to its former glory, his primary adversaries being the NCR and Caesar's Legion factions. Each group in the trio of villainous organizations readied themselves for a war fought over the Hoover Dam, its ability to generate hydroelectric power and water making the old war structure worth its weight in gold. Since every faction
Sì,
nurtured
è la
different
storia
ideas about how best
di
to
tutto
revive
Fallout
and control the
dall'inizio a
Mojave
oggi.
Wasteland,
Più lo
Fallout's
sviluppo dei
hallmark system
giochi,
of
direi.
choices and consequences encouraged players to constantly bounce between sides and rethink their alliances. This level of roleplay required robust mechanics, all of which factored into the almost overwhelming scope, which Chris Avallone labeled New Vegas's biggest problem.
There's a lot of angles to this caper, complexities aplenty. But plenty of action too, enough for both of us. But we don't jabber about that out here in public.
In spite of its 18-month development cycle and relatively limited budget, the RPG's scale stretched too wide at the outset. After all, in addition to building on the foundations laid by Bethesda's Fallout 3, New Vegas let Obsidian revive elements of its axed Fallout 3 project codenamed Van Buren. The result more or less encompassed the team's vision, yet many recycled Van Buren ideas landed on the cutting room floor near the end of production. J.E. Sawyer divulged how New Vegas's most significant cuts removed the player's opportunity to better understand Caesar's Legion, a faction designed for the Black Isle-developed Fallout 3. Fashioned with sensibilities borrowed from Roman military history and Apocalypse Now's Colonel Kurtz, earlier iterations of Caesar's Legion in New Vegas occupied 3 vast locations east of the Colorado River. Developers had filled each area with content wildly different from the rest of the open world. In fact, another holdover from Van Buren was Ulysses, the Chris Avallone-created companion who would have proven sympathetic to the very divisive Legion. Obsidian later regretted excising the supplemental Caesar's Legion content, retrospectively identifying with players who
è la storia di Fallout.
faction as repulsive and severely lacking
New Vegas è
redemptive
referenza a Star Wars?
qualities. Yet, as
Immagino
the
a
October
tante cose.
2000 ship date drew near, the team had no choice but to trim down the RPG's exceedingly large scope. Developers equally spent much of the final stretch ironing out a litany of bugs, many caused by Obsidian's unfamiliarity with the Gamebryo engine. Still, the title hit PC, PS3, and Xbox 360 with errors that harmed its short-term success and overall quality. Freezing issues, game-breaking quest glitches, and superficial technical bugs bedeviled the otherwise well-received spin-off. Except it wasn't received well enough to net Obsidian a bonus payment. Chris Avallone disclosed the details in a since-deleted post on social media, telling curious fans Obsidian's deal with Bethesda was a straight payment, with no royalties. Only a Metacritic score of 85 or higher would have earned the New Vegas studio a bonus. The aggregate score landed on 84 once all reviews were taken into account.
Che merda mettere i bonus sul Metacritic, guarda, è una cosa che trovo oscena.
And DLC like Dead Money and Lonesome Road let a crew helmed by Avallone flesh out the lore and experiment with quests. According to Sawyer, the add-ons were a way to delve into concepts that seemed risky for main game content, yet suited the RPG's core tenets.
Ah, la serie TV, sì, l'ho vista, molto figa.
Releases provided the Black Isle alum another opportunity to resurrect plans from Van Buren. Honest Hearts,
I bonus
for example,
economici alla
finally
gente in base al
introduced
Metacritic.
Joshua Graham,
Veramente
the Burning Man mentioned
tremenda
in
sta
New Vegas
cosa.
proper as a nod to a Van Buren character named the Hanged Man. Avallone noted in a 2011 interview with Game Banshee that he loosely based the Forbidden Zone Dome in the Old World Blues DLC on Van Buren's The Boulder Dome. Unfortunately, for some longtime fans, these additions didn't live up to their expectations. New Vegas's add-ons garnered tepid responses upon release. However, opinions warmed over time, enough that Fallout faithful hold out hope for Obsidian's potential return to the post-apocalyptic IP. But, in a way, the former Black Isle developers did say their final goodbyes. As Avallone told Game Banshee, Lonesome Road reset the game world's culture clock. its theme purposefully built around the final image in Fallout 1 of a vault dweller marching into a lonely future. New Vegas matured into a series highlight over time, a genuine classic that many agree counts as the best of Fallout's adventures. By the time Bethesda Game Studios released its sequel in 2015 then, a new benchmark had been set. The Bethesda developers weren't too keen on following in anyone's footsteps except their own. However, having gotten started on fresh conceptual and story ideas shortly after wrapping up Fallout 3's DLC in 2009, creative director Todd Howard reiterated as much when speaking with Digital Spy in 2015. From the beginning, Howard and his team knew the next mainline entry would open in a vault, given their importance to the series as a whole. A fascination with the retro-themed time before the bombs dropped informed embryonic design work on Fallout 4 as well. Each of these elements played a central role in the project's short prologue sequence. And once the basics were assembled, the pre-production group began devising broader strokes about the game world and setting. Discussions on where to take Fallout next covered a range of locales. Boston won out, in part because Fallout 3 and its DLC directly referenced the Commonwealth region encompassing Massachusetts more than a few times. Boston's deep roots in American history also secured its status as the final choice. Bethesda wouldn't begin fully fleshing out Fallout 4 until it deployed the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim late in 2011. And because of the technological and game design advancements that instantly made Skyrim a landmark release, the Fallout crew gained a better handle on where the post-apocalyptic adventure was headed and how to get there. An upgraded iteration of the Gamebryo engine had powered Skyrim's vast open world. Named Creation Engine, this technology underwent yet another overhaul for Fallout 4, making way for improved animations, dynamic dialogue systems, deeper character customization, and BGS's
Il famoso
first
engine di
fully voiced
Bethesda,
protagonist. These changes were
di cui io
buttressed by
non
other
sono
gameplay
fan.
altering additions, namely a canine companion, gear and weapon mods, and an in-game level editor. Todd Howard explained on several occasions how player feedback on Skyrim dictated their approach to Fallout 4's open-world design and storytelling. Scouring critic and user reviews unearthed the pluses and minuses of sandbox gameplay, specifically with respect to the cadence players enjoyed while freely exploring. Because of Bethesda's focus on providing complete freedom, the seminal Grand Theft Auto 4 from Rockstar Games became another key point of reference, due in no small part to its success at making players believe they could go anywhere and do anything. GTA 5 turned individual users into the directors of the uncontrolled chaos around Los Santos. Fallout 4 developers aimed to accomplish the same feat.
And one of the great things about having a fully dynamic game engine is all of this just works in real time. Rip it apart and build the way you want.
Maybe.
Sì.
Those walls could definitely use some work.
I'll admit, it's seen better days.
One way Bethesda surrendered more control to
Appunto.
players was through the reworked conversation system. Conversing with Fallout 3 and Skyrim NPCs
Invece
previously
te è probabilmente uno dei
lost
open
players
world più
into a
credibili negli
stagnant
ultimi
scene
anni.
bereft of
L'ho giocato
anything
troppo
mimicking
poco,
real
però mi sento di dire abbastanza,
NPCs
sì,
spoke,
già da quel poco
and
che
the
l'ho
protagonist
giocato.
had no choice but to listen. Skyrim's PC community took matters into its own hands with mods that instantly skipped dialogue. A dynamic system offering a greater sense of agency materialized during Fallout 4 development to address this problem. Such change meant NPCs could be interrupted mid-conversation by something as simple as the sole survivor walking away, or something as drastic as a vehicle exploding near the player character.
It's in pretty good shape.
That's right. They don't make them like they used to.
The
Così.
then next-generation creation engine facilitated the conversation system's revamp and helped enhance the new dialogue functionality. Notably, Bethesda knew when entering full production that voiced leads served as but one primary goal. In the Digital Spy sit-down, Howard recalled the decision's driving force being the need to convincingly portray strong emotional beats. Veteran voiceover artists Brian T. Delaney and Courtney Taylor brought the male and female protagonists to life, respectively, and individually delivered about 13,000 lines of dialogue in a story that picked up the morning the bombs dropped. Having players experience the end of the world, connected them to their custom character through a real sense of personal loss. Fallout 4 opened with the protagonist beginning an early morning alongside their spouse and infant son. The prologue front-loaded the emotionality, giving the player and the fictional hero ties to the past and something to shoot for in the future. And that future, or Fallout 4's present day, took place 200 years after the world's last gasp. Wide linear storytelling of this nature contributed only so much to Bethesda's interest in doubling down on player freedom. Above all else, gameplay was paramount to evolving beyond the shortcomings in Fallout 3, the most distinctive being its middling first-person shooting mechanics that created an over-reliance on VATS. Todd Howard reflected on the details in a discussion with GameSpot, wherein he stated that a significant period of production centralized fine-tuning the FPS gameplay. The team maintained VATS as a viable option while simultaneously balancing adjacent mechanics in hopes it would be used as a crux in combat. Their approach fostered a targeting system players could either largely ignore or build their character around to the point of becoming incredibly powerful. Fallout 4's in-game building features were integrated with the same
Bethesda sopravvalutata, hanno dato un po' la testa a Todd.
for people invested in diving deeper, but not necessary
Potrebbe
for
essere.
completing the game.
Sì.
Talks of integrating the mechanic came up fairly early, inspired by the fact that numerous staffers on the 100-plus person team were knee-deep in sandbox crafting games Minecraft and Terraria. Folding a somewhat comparable feature set into the premise of Fallout seemed rather straightforward, but Howard admitted the crew struggled with ironing out the mechanics, particularly because they didn't want the system built in a separate editor. Fortunately, much of what Bethesda Game Studios envisioned for Fallout 4 manifested in the end, and as production wound down in the last few months, the company found itself with just a few more hurdles to overcome.
Sbram.
Days ahead of Bethesda Softworks E3 2015 press conference, the publisher unveiled Fallout 4 with a teaser website and cinematic trailer, promising further details would surface during the actual event. The pre-E3 reveal provided a mere taste to prevent the full showcase from feeling too overwhelming without a primer. It worked in Bethesda's favor, given the Fallout 4 presentation's positive impressions from franchise faithful. Best of all, the title boasted a November 2015 ship date. Thus, the wait for its debut lasted a few months. When asked about the short stretch between reveal and release, Todd Howard told Digital Spy he personally would have preferred a shorter gap. However, retail logistics concerning worldwide shipments of physical discs meant the 5-month stretch supplied the best-case scenario. But fans were sated with the rollout of Fallout Shelter in the hours following the event. Formally announced in the same showcase as the
è
fourth
vero,
main
sì.
Fallout Shelter hit iOS the night of E3.
Fallout Shelter è il tipo di gioco con cui potrei tantissimo, cioè potenzialmente come genere io ci vado sotto con questo tipo di giochi, l'ho provato però non mi è piaciuto.
And was teased in the animated Vault Tech ad featured in Fallout 3's E3 2008 trailer. XCOM and Spaceship Sim FTL Faster Than Light were touchstones for the mobile game's creation. However, Howard admitted there were times in the process that team leadership questioned whether Shelter had become too much of a distraction from Fallout 4 proper. The inherent desire to see the spin-off through to completion won out though, and it did so in spades. Within days of release, Fallout Shelter skyrocketed on the App Store,
Ha avuto un gran
securing a spot as the
successo.
#1 game
Sì.
after beating out Candy Crush Sega. By day 10 of availability, the strategy game had topped the charts in 48 countries and amassed an impressive 70 million play sessions per day. For a time, it also counted among the highest-grossing apps on iOS, despite being a free game whose only monetization existed in lunchboxes filled with loot that could be earned through playing. Of course, Bethesda enjoyed another burst of success when Fallout 4 dropped onto PC, PS4, and Xbox One on November 10th that same year. Critic reviews praised it as the culmination of everything Bethesda
La scelta ci ho passati mesi sul cellulare, era una droga. Che infatti immaginavo. Potenzialmente poteva esserlo anche per me, ma non lo so, c'è qualcosa in quel gioco che non mi ha preso proprio.
Fans were less impressed. Mixed and negative user reviews on Metacritic critiqued the lack of depth, lamenting how the once hailed role-playing elements suddenly felt pared down. The disconnect between critic and audience reception aside, many agreed graphical shortcomings, technical hiccups, and dated systems held it back, the aging creation engine taking much of the blame in this respect. And comparisons to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt's groundbreaking release months prior didn't do Fallout 4 any favors. Either way, the RPG had a long tail, owed to 7 add-ons launching across a nearly 2-year period. Automatron, Far Harbor, and Nuka World were story expansions inviting players to explore new adventures, while 3 workshop DLCs and a high-res texture pack rounded out Bethesda's post-launch support. The premiere of Amazon Studios' celebrated Fallout TV adaptation eventually gave the title a new lease on life, boosting Fallout 4.
Sì, serio, ha avuto un boost dalla serie TV veramente importante.
The long-awaited deployment of a next-gen upgrade for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S underscored the surge. But the Commonwealth outing, which shipped 12 million units in one day, wasn't the only Bethesda-developed Fallout experience to reap the benefits of the TV show's surprise success.
Anche 76.
Like, hey, you know, we should have done that, or we should do it. And then, you know, as Fallout 4 is going on, it becomes no, we should really do it, like, as its own thing.
According to Todd Howard's comments in a no-clip documentary, talk of a multiplayer Fallout picked up steam at Bethesda Game Studios in 2013. Some staffers at the Rockville headquartered outfit had faith in the concept. Others expressed skepticism. The uncertainty gave the studio license to table the discussion in favor of focusing on wrapping up Fallout 4. Yet the idea wouldn't remain shelved for very long. Bethesda Game Studios Austin, the ZeniMax subsidiary behind canceled free-to-play hero shooter Battlecry, seemed the ideal home for testing Fallout's multiplayer capabilities, considering the studio's MMO bona fides. While the Rockville office finished Fallout 4 DLC support and shifted into full production on Starfield, the former Battlecry crew shouldered the weight of retrofitting Creation Engine into technology capable of powering online play.
Al 76 sgradevole sotto ogni punto di vista, è iniziato malissimo, però poi mi sa che si è ripreso. Ciao Aldo, non so come stia andando adesso, ripeto.
Creation Engine remained the technology of choice because of the Rockville staffers' familiarity with its various iterations. Training senior developers on new and unfamiliar tools would have proven too costly in the long run. In other words, higher-ups considered the old technology the path of least resistance. But the easy way out begat complex issues, the vast majority of which wouldn't reach a resolution until after Fallout 76's 2018 arrival. Under the condition of anonymity, ex-BGS Austin employees told Kotaku in 2022 that Creation Engine's struggle to support multiplayer stemmed from its origins as single-player technology. Every element in the scripting of previous open worlds from Bethesda equaled an event that revolved around the player character and nothing else. So if the protagonist wasn't present in an area, said area ceased to exist as far as the game was concerned. Making one player the center of the in-game universe couldn't be effectively translated to multiplayer environments where all spaces must constantly exist, since multiple users simultaneously inhabited the same location. One Kotaku source insisted the amount of time it required to properly adapt Creation Engine to Fallout 76's live service-related needs would have put added pressure on the
Questa Day One avanti ai Fallout, poi vittime di quei figli di Trula che lanciarono le nuke nei punti storia per impedire ai nuovi giocatori progredire. Questa è colpa di Bethesda. Se permetti di fare una cosa che può rompere il gioco, troverai dei giocatori che lo faranno. Quindi non dovevi permetterlo. Detto Cano, grazie mille del follow, benvenuto. Ciao Maxmoon.
At last, today is your reclamation day. I bet you're just bursting your bolts to get out there
questa gen? Fino a questa gen, non lo so, forse. Però ormai c'è tanta di quella differenziazione che c'è spazio un po' per tutto.
Quality assurance testers and designers dreaded when these issues cropped up because design leads wouldn't, accordingly, reconfigure deadlines to accommodate the required fixes. Members from the QA and design departments were thus left with the burden of crunching for 10 to 16 hours a day to pick up the ensuing slack. Most of the nearly 12 sources Kotaku interviewed said crunching on Fallout 76
Quindi insultano tanto di così tranquillo?
physical and mental health.
E in realtà non mi
The
insultano
specifics of
tanto.
the accounts suggested QA took the hardest hits on this front due to a lengthy period in which 10-plus-hour workdays for 6 days a week became the norm. Bethesda's allegedly debilitating crunch practices were compounded by both QA staffers and contractors receiving poor pay. Some argued that even overtime pay wasn't worth the stress, though former employees shared conflicting reports about overtime mandates. According to a few
Emanuele.
accounts, Bethesda bosses often made staying
Documentario
late
di
and working
Fallout.
weekends mandatory. However, others recalled coercion tactics wherein leads would state that if no one volunteered, the whole crew would be called in on weekends. And some sources asserted peer pressure and a desire to move up in the company were motivating factors for those who crunched. Specifics aside, it was a vexing issue to the point that at least 2 people reported it to ZeniMax Media's QA director, Rob Gray. They said he either deflected the complaints or rejected the notion that his department struggled with crunch. Todd Howard addressed crunch in a 2019 IGN interview, acknowledging Bethesda's over-reliance on the practice in the past, but asserting it was being better managed. One developer took offense, telling Kotaku that Howard either knew nothing of the day-to-day happenings or he didn't view quality assurance as part of the wider team structure. Crunch on Fallout 76 also adversely affected QA because many in the department felt their extensive work hours were wasted. QA testers and the main development crew inhabited the same building at the Rockville headquarters, yet the former were forbidden from directly communicating with the latter. Testers sent their feedback to design leads, who dispensed the information to developers on the ground floor. Since those responsible for identifying bugs couldn't converse with the people charged with fixing them, known glitches went untouched for days or weeks while both groups waited for leaders to bridge the communication gap. This meant testers monitored increasingly obsolete builds that seldom received timely updates. One former QA member recalled a colleague lashing out in a meeting by calling the impending workday useless, since they didn't have access to the build they needed. Designers didn't have an easy going on the project either. Aware of the problems that would inevitably surface, many questioned how Fallout 76 would manage griefing, online stability, and quest checkpoints, only for management to ignore their worries or set them aside indefinitely. In the midst of devising large-scale gameplay events, then, designers were unaware of how players would interact with the content or each other on servers. And to the team's chagrin, insufficient resources hindered their ability to do the math themselves. Combined, these troubles created low morale within the Austin and Rockville camps, in turn leaving QA testers,
c'è un documentario e un video bellissimo su Fallout 76 e li abbiamo visti.
Purpose of producing single-player RPGs didn't think Fallout belonged in the realm of multiplayer at all. Staff retention consequently ballooned as production progressed. The QA department often lost testers, and an unspecified amount of senior talent exited as well, forcing the Rockville outfit to draft personnel from other ZeniMax teams like its very own Starfield and Redfall studio, Arcane Austin. At the nexus of it all rested one central issue: management. From the start, those in the trenches recognized the jarring absence of a coherent vision. Todd Howard led Fallout 76's creation on paper, yet those familiar with internal operations insisted he devoted the lion's share of his attention to Starfield after shipping Fallout 4. Select designers likened his leadership on Fallout 76 to seagulling, whereby he'd swoop in and dump all over an idea. Others expressed indifference, calling Howard a decent executive producer whose bigger is better philosophy seemed flawed. Worst still, the feeling of incoherence spread all the way to the top, based on the accounts of some former developers. Bethesda reportedly wasn't prepared for the challenges endemic to running a live service, nor did leadership anticipate the toll such an undertaking would have on the team at large. Upon noticing the obstacles, executives assumed senior staff members with credits on Elder Scrolls and Fallout would help alleviate them. They were ultimately proven wrong, and their alleged refusal to properly utilize the BGS Austin office's MMO expertise until it was too late further disadvantaged the troubled project.
lot of you who are really here or really wondering about Fallout 76.
Peppe, ciao.
And I'm pleased to tell you that your wait is finally over.
Bethesda Softworks unveiled Fallout 76 during its E3 2018 conference, inviting players on a new wasteland adventure set in Appalachia, a region comprising parts of West Virginia. Fans met the always online mandate with tepid reception and cast doubt on the project's viability. Skepticism seemed justified once mixed beta impressions made the rounds ahead of launch. Those who played the beta found a lonely experience scarred by technical glitches and performance issues. It looked and played like a Fallout game, yet the conspicuous absence of trademark elements like NPCs left the online title feeling soulless. Fallout 76's disastrous PC and console launch in November 2018 only amplified the unease and unrest amongst the fan community. Game-breaking glitches caused crashes galore, a number of them occurring when users performed actions as simple as visiting certain locations. Server issues similarly bedeviled the experience, along with graphical errors, distracting animation hiccups, and a treasure trove of UI and inventory bugs that impacted everything from fast travel functionality to looting mechanics. The developer's lengthy period of silence post-launch exacerbated frustrations about the state of the game. When Bethesda addressed complaints nearly 2 weeks later, the player base received an apology and a promise to make amends through timely bug fixes and content updates. But other controversies stirred in the background, including a security breach that exposed customer data and the dismal quality of physical items included in the costly Armor Edition.
Come me lo
A
ricordo.
litany of updates would roll out before Fallout 76 satisfactorily stabilized. Afterward, the game's developers deployed content updates packed with new features. March 2019's Wild Appalachia marked the first of such content drops, adding camp decorating, 2 extra quests, and the PvP-based survival mode. The changes featured in Year 1 of Fallout 76's post-release support received varied player reception, but the online title hit its stride when Year 2 arrived alongside Wastelanders. This long-awaited free expansion, most importantly, added human NPCs, on top of a choice and consequence-filled storyline. Wastelanders garnered lukewarm reviews from critics and players in April 2020, but sharply demarcated the line between Fallout 76's rough beginnings and potentially bright future, thanks to the game-changing updates that followed. By mid-2021, the consensus was that Bethesda had repaired the online spin-off's reputation. Such feelings had increased tenfold by the time Amazon's Fallout TV show premiered in the spring of 2024. Its critical success drawing newcomers and lapsed players to Appalachia in droves. The cross-media boost resulted in a staggering 1 million users playing Fallout 76 in a single day. Rather fortuitously, Bethesda capitalized on the newfound public interest by announcing the Skyline Valley update. 17+ million users and increasingly ambitious content releases suggest Fallout 76 still has a long country road ahead of it, as does the brand.
Vabbè, quindi tutto sommato sta andando bene.
Caught between Bethesda's primary commitment to the years-long development of The Elder Scrolls 6 and a desire to improve its output. However, as Todd Howard mentioned in a June 2024 interview with YouTuber Mr. Matty Plays, the studio sees no sense in rushing out a new installment, not even to take advantage of the TV show's popularity. He argued that larger releases take time, favoring the idea of allowing players
No,
to
vabbè, ma non
miss
era
the
possibile.
franchise to ensure its eventual return feels
Magari con la
meaningful in the end.
stagione 3
While Howard's
della serie
comments may or
TV.
may not pacify those who resent the extensive intervals between core Fallout experiences, his words do ring true. As Fallout has continuously proven with its myriad delays, nuked concepts like
Ciao
Fallout
Aldo.
Extreme and Van
Ma su
Buren,
Twitch non ho la
and
doppia
entries
camera,
that
però
have taken a while to hit their stride,
nei talk di
long
solito
waits
c'è.
can produce the
Anzi,
most
tripla.
thrilling adventures in the wasteland.
Base al feedback che ho io, Fallout 76 adesso è molto meglio di prima. Però non so altro.
War. War never changes.
Ok,
Thank you for watching
è
our
finito
video.
qua.
We'd like to take this time to thank, by name, the generous Patreons who have pledged to our Hall of Fame reward tier. Disco Cobra 2013.
E adesso ringraziano i Patreon più generosi, quelli del top tier.
Sauerkraut. Shuan Chinwin.
Questo canale fa dei
Fat
documentari
Green
veramente
Dragon.
molto belli.
And those currently subscribed to our producer reward tier. Adam Miller. Brock Piviroto. Darirab Sigurdsson. Dave Oshry. DCX NG. DJ Redden. Edward Reigns.
Vabbè, comunque ragazzi devo dire che adesso abbassiamo un attimino. Devo dire ragazzi che lo sviluppo di Fallout è anche più accidentato, caotico e pieno di casini di quanto immaginassi. Perché onestamente l'idea che mi ero fatto io, non conoscendo i primissimi Fallout, è che fossero esattamente quel tipo di giochi ispirati e pionieristici, che in realtà sono, per carità, ma fatti con casualità e amore. Ok? E invece è stato un casino di merda pure allora, e non è solo la gestione Bethesda che crea sti macelli. Direi, giusto? Quindi, ragazzi, è stato veramente un gran bel documentario. Non ho moltissimo da aggiungere, perché appunto è un documentario e non so su che cosa ci sia veramente da riflettere, considerando anche il successo dei vari titoli, nonostante le controversie, e la serie TV, mi sa che il franchise andrà avanti. Credo anche che per un Fallout 5 ci vorrà da ci vorrà attendere veramente tanto tempo, e credo che continuerà Fallout 76, perché ora c'è anche un'altra stagione della serie TV che pare sì, è stata confermata. Chissà se arriveranno più in là, ma se arriveranno più in là potrebbe essere che sincronizzeranno una stagione della serie TV con l'uscita del nuovo Fallout. Io dal canto mio, ragazzi, sapete quali sono i miei gusti. Io con i giochi Bethesda ho dei problemi, non mi piace il gameplay, proprio non so, quella legnosità, quella poca d'utilità, ma non riesco proprio a giocarci come vorrei. Però l'ambientazione di Fallout, per esempio, la adoro. Mi piacerebbe tanto approfondirla, e quindi dai, mi è venuto comodo questo documentario per esplorare un po'. Io la serie TV, se non altro quella l'ho vista tutta, molto bella, e aspetto anche la seconda stagione. Va bene ragazzi, questo era il documentario, fatemi sapere anche voi un po' che cosa ne pensate. Di nuovo andate a supportare il canale di Gamers, perché fanno delle cose veramente fighe, e niente, così.